Welcome to the Spotlight series. On today's episode, I'm with Katie Wyatt. And Katie is a podcaster, speaker, writer, coach, and trainer. And she isn't just building a business, she is building an empire. She's helping others to build theirs too. Katie is an inspiring blend of intelligence, strategy, wit, and charm. She's grown her authority, influence, and online presence rapidly using the podcasting platform. After launching her first successful podcast, Empire by Design, in 2014, she has made a name for herself in the podcasting world. She is the founder of the course Podwell for entrepreneurs to learn to grow their profile and influence with a podcast, and Podcast Empire, a membership community for podcasters focused on growing their audience, converting more clients, and creating community. It's so cool to have you here, Katie. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks so much for having me, Renee. It's very cool to be here.
So I would love to just start straight away and say, how on earth did you stumble across podcasting 2 years ago? Because I mean, now it's kind of all the thing, but 2 years ago, what made you just jump in there and do it?
Yeah, it was actually one of those weird, not even a weird story, but those moments where you're like, I could have just ignored that and gotten on with my life. But basically, in my day job, I work with social enterprises and I deliver quite a lot of workshops. And I was delivering a workshop one day and we were talking about, I think the topic was pricing, because they're all new budding entrepreneurs. And the guy that was filming the workshop tweeted me and said, there's a really great podcast episode on this exact topic. You should listen to it. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I was literally within days of that, I was about to take my dog for a walk and I was thinking, what am I going to listen to? And I thought, I'm going to listen to that podcast episode. And it changed my life, because all of a sudden I could listen to podcasts when I was walking the dog, when I was driving the car, doing things when you kind of feel like they're just, empty moments. And I was like, I'm like always learning. I'm never, there's never a wasted moment. So that was kind of the beginning of my falling in love and having a very long romance with podcasts.
But how did you, that's, a cool throwaway line from someone at a workshop that kind of spurred you to discover listening to podcasts. But how do you go from listening to a podcast to saying, hey, why don't I just host one?
I know. And that was weird too. I think what happened was I was listening to so many business podcasts. And there was one particular podcaster I listened to. He's an Australian guy. His name's Tim Reed. His podcast is called Small Business, Big Marketing. I haven't listened to it in a long, long time, but he's a fantastic podcaster. And he would always say, guys, you just need to start a podcast. Like, what it has done for my business is amazing. And I would be kind of listening and I'd be thinking, I reckon this is like, I love this platform so much. I reckon this is something that I would enjoy doing. And I couldn't believe it about myself, because I've never been like a closet radio DJ or anything. I was always the closet teen fiction author. So it surprised me, and it was not at all in line with what I expected to feel. But I was like, I think that it's me. And so I did it.
Wow. And here you are today. So tell me about what your podcast looks like today. What is it doing for your business, and how has it impacted what you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been podcasting for over 2 years, and my podcast has been through one rebrand in that time. In the last 6 months, it's gone from being the Wellness Entrepreneur to Empire by Design. And look, the role it plays in my business is it's the top of my marketing funnel. It is the way that most people find me. There are, quite a few different ways that people find me, but the podcast has always been and is still the main way that people discover me. And then they kind of, that's how they get to know me. And if they like the podcast and they listen to multiple episodes, that's, hours of time that I'm in their ear and they're getting to know me. So that trust factor, or the trust curve gets up. We get up that very quickly with new people that have discovered me. So that's the role it plays in my business.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of answers for people who are listening and thinking, why would I start a podcast? That kind of answers that question, doesn't it? But, you know, are there other reasons that people would start a podcast?
Look, I think, it definitely does answer the question, because it should play that very, entry point role in your marketing funnel. But it's getting harder to do that because there's more and more podcasters. So it's really important, I think, if you want it to do that, to not just say, well, I'll just start a podcast for female entrepreneurs and I'll be golden, because there's dozens and dozens and possibly even hundreds of podcasts for female entrepreneurs. So you really have to think about, well, how is it going to stand out and really talk directly to my ideal client? My podcast is evolving quite a bit at the moment, and that is because I'm getting more and more niched around who I'm serving and what I'm doing. But if you're not trying to grow, get direct clients from the podcast, it might be playing more of a role around personal branding and building your authority, or if you want to be recognized as a thought leader in your field, or if you just want to build a personal brand because maybe you're in a career, but we all know that our own CV is sort of, the story of that is bigger than any one job that we have along the way. And so a podcast can be a really great way to kind of build the knowledge of you in your industry and your authority in your field, or the field that you're really interested in. So it can play lots of different roles.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm learning this, rapidly, because I'm so brand new to this and I'm just like thrown in the deep end. I think it was like a conversation in December I had with Stevie, my content producer, and we were just chatting away, and he was like, hey, I think I might start a podcast. I'd like to there's a whole bunch of people I really want to interview, and let's just turn it into something.
Yeah. And look, that's often where people start. And, I obviously teach people to think about strategy and purpose and all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm sure you can attest to this, you work out so much stuff just because you've started and you've started producing content, and then you're like, oh my God, I realized I really love doing it this way, or wow, that really resonated, I'm going to do more of that. Like, you can't figure half of that stuff out until you actually get started.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I'm kind of just like jump in and do it kind of.
Yeah, good on you. And well done for starting, because you're such a energetic personality that I think it's great for podcasting and for video.
Well, I was just going to say, I have a great head for podcasting. The face for radio.
Yeah, I'm the same. Face for radio. That's me.
So we've talked about the why, and so then, okay, let's just say that people listening are thinking, all right, okay, maybe, so the coaches and thought leaders out there who are listening think, okay, maybe this is something that I would like to bring into my business. What process would you recommend they go through to go from, I might be a podcaster, to, hey, let's launch this baby?
Look, I think one of the real indicators that it might be the right platform for you is if you like listening to podcasts. Obviously that's the first story I told, was how much I actually love listening to podcasts. I have had people approach me that have never listened to a podcast before that want to do my course and learn to launch a podcast. And that's fine, and great, whatever. But it's actually, to me, that's a bit of an indication that they may not end up being consistent on the platform. And like any content platform, consistency is one of the keys to growing and succeeding and improving and all of those things. So I would say, if you're listening and you think maybe that's what I should be doing, I would ask you first, do you like listening to podcasts? Because if you do, it's going to be much more intuitive to you what works on the platform and what doesn't. So I use the example of YouTube, right? I do not go to YouTube to find content. I completely admire people that have thriving YouTube channels. I release my podcast on YouTube and I don't know what to do with it because I'm not on YouTube. So I'm like, well, it's there. Like, no one's finding it because I don't understand how people find things on YouTube because I'm not on YouTube. So I think that's a real indicator. And then if that, if you're ticking that box, then I would then ask, like, do you have the capacity and are you willing to commit to being consistent on the platform? Because that is like the fastest way to grow. It's the fastest way to improve. Doesn't sound sexy, but it is the only thing that will serve you week in, week out, is to show up and be consistent and be really serious about your commitment to the platform. So I think if you're ticking those two boxes, then honey, you need to start a podcast.
So let's just touch on that consistency factor. What does consistency look like?
Well, it looks like whatever it looks like for you. So it doesn't have to mean you're producing a daily show or a weekly show, but it does mean that you need to decide how often you're going to release and endeavour to do that. And so I have had a fortnightly show for 2 years. I've only turned into a weekly show in the past 6 months. And that was because I did not feel that I could be committed to being consistent at that. And, there's lots of ways that we can help ourselves be consistent. One of the first ways is just to actually be really intentional about the fact that you're going to be consistent. Because the minute it's like, eating crappy food or something. The minute you let one little thing sneak in, it's so easy to just let everything sneak in. So if you're willing to kind of, maybe I just won't release this week because I'm a bit busy, then you're probably going to go 6 weeks without releasing a show. And I know lots of people that have done this. It's called the pod fade effect in the podcasting industry. And there are many more people pod fading than podcasting. So if you are going to consistently podcast, you're already ahead of the pack.
Yes, great. Well, I think I'm going to be okay there because I tend to be a batch processor. So I have a bank now of at least 20, probably 25 episodes already ready to go, recorded.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it being consistent because I know we've got a bunch of episodes ready to go. So if I miss a week of recording something, I'm safe.
Yeah, and look, that's a really good thing to do for people who are going to worry about that stuff, is to have, episodes there ready to go. I find that I start to freak out if I've got too many, because then it starts to feel a bit stale for me. Like I just published an interview yesterday and I listened back to it, and we recorded it in December. So, and we're talking now in March. And so we're talking about Christmas and we're talking about setting New Year's goals. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's just ridiculous. So it really depends on your working style. I'm not a batcher, but I tend to like doing interviews, which is why I had so many pre-done. But if you're a batcher, batching is brilliant. If you're not a batcher, then I would suggest doing something like setting the same time in your calendar each week to be your podcast time. Now, it might not be that you can do your interview then, but you can probably do all the other work around your podcast then. Like, do whatever works for you to keep you accountable. And if that means outsourcing components of the show so that you're accountable to somebody else, like they might do the editing or the show notes, then that's another really good way to keep yourself accountable to somebody other than you.
Yes. And I'm all about outsourcing. I don't think I could possibly be doing this podcast if I did not have someone else to give all the stuff to. The only thing I do is record, gets uploaded to Dropbox, and someone else does the rest.
Yeah, and that's, that is the perfect world, I think. And that's how I help a lot of people as well, because a lot of people just want to be able to do that. And it's the way I like to work as well. But a lot of people can't afford to do that. And so therefore, it is fair to say it is a bit of work putting out a podcast episode. So it's, again, that's why it's so important for you to be committed to it, because the minute it starts to feel like hard work, you kind of either have to know why you're doing it and enjoy it anyway, or you will just kind of go, too hard, I can't love it anymore.
Pod fade to black.
Yes.
Flat line. Yeah. Cool. So what what process do you recommend for getting a podcast off the ground?
Do you mean like the actual practical how-to?
Yeah. So what, someone's sitting there listening, thinking, okay, I'm going to start a podcast. What do they do? What's the first thing they need to do? Where
do I begin? Look, most people who are in that position want to know, what do I need? Like, how do I practically, technically get this done? So I'll start there, even though I don't think that's the right place to start, but that is where most people's worries are. Like, the biggest block to people, I think, is the technical barrier. So, I mean, you can start where you are. Like, if you have a smartphone, you can start. Obviously, if you're watching this on video, you'll see that I have a fancy microphone on a, shock mount, on a boomer. Like, I did not start there. I did start with this microphone. He's been with me since the beginning. But,
my poor little baby.
Renee's microphone just made an appearance.
I've got microphone envy.
But, you don't have to start there. You can start literally with your smartphone and the earphones that come with your smartphone, particularly if you're an Apple user like I am. You can start as simple as that. There are so many recording apps that you can download for free or very low cost. And there you go, you're recording. I would recommend getting a decent microphone, but again, it's not essential. And, I have other earphones, like I've got a number of different headsets, but they're not essential. Then all you really need is a way to record. So if you're not using an app on your phone, then download a free software like Audacity or GarageBand on your computer and use that. I use Audacity to record all of my intros and outros. We're using Zoom right now for this. So if you want to do video interviews, Zoom is a great option. Skype is just as good an option. Although I tend to like the interface of Zoom better. I think the video quality seems to be better. But there's options. Zoom is more expensive than Skype, so maybe you start with Skype. If you're doing interviews and you're doing them over Skype, then you want to be able to record both sides of the interview. There's really good call recorders for very low cost. So Ecamm is probably the best for Mac. And you can use Pamela or Skype call recorder for Windows. So, they're kind of the basics, and then you're ready to go. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated once you start talking about where am I going to host it, how am I going to get it into iTunes, and I don't want to bore the ears off people. But it's not, it's not an undoable process. It is a little bit more complicated than just publishing a blog, which I actually think is good. Like, it's good that there's a little barrier because it makes us think before we actually get into it.
Yeah, and that's right. And if it was easy, everyone would be doing it and we'd just be lost in the noise.
Exactly. And that's, another thing to just love about this platform. It's probably one of the only platforms, it's the only one I can think of in the social arena that isn't impacted yet, and I don't know if that will change, by algorithms and things that we don't understand. The fact is, if people are listening to your show, they're leaving you reviews and it's, they're downloading the show, you will show up in the charts. It's not like you had to pay for the Facebook ad and understand the algorithm and know how to do this and, bend over 3 times backwards to just get something seen by people. So I think that's, there's something really organic and deserving about that, which I just think is brilliant. So it means that tiny players can get known just as easily as others.
Great. So that's kind of, where I'm at the moment, having launched the podcast and then just thinking, because I'm used to being on all those other platforms where I'm, it's, I've got to now work out all the, how do I get seen here? And I'm in a bit of that space now, having just launched the podcast. So what, is it really that organic? Is that it? I just kind of launch and keep putting the episodes out there. Is that it? Is that my job done?
Well, I mean, it could be it, but it's not entirely it. Like, you really have to market your show and you have to find listeners. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And I'm sure you're already doing a number of those. So taking your show and repurposing it so that you can share it on social media in a way that makes sense for the social media platform. So you're obviously not just going to share a clip from the interview on somewhere like Pinterest. Like, that's impossible. But you might create a very Pinterest pinnable image that gives a little bit of a teaser or how-tos or steps from the show. Or you might then create a quote image that you share on Instagram or on Twitter, or little just lines from the show or teasers that you share on Twitter or Facebook. So there's lots of different ways to market your show, and you really have to and you should, use either like an automated scheduler or a plugin. Like, it used to be called Tweet Old Posts, but it's not called that anymore. I just can't remember what it's called. That just continues to recycle, because this is the thing, as podcasters, we're creating this amazing archive of content, and you want to keep it all being promoted. So it's not just about promoting the new show, but promoting old shows. So now that I've been going for over 2 years, I now have categories where I've got my top 10 shows of all time. I've got all of my interviews with podcasters all grouped together, all of my interviews with product-based businesses all grouped together. And now that I've just started doing on-air coaching calls, I'm grouping all of those together. So then I can refer to them in an episode. So if somebody's loving hearing that type of interview from me, I've given them a very easy way to go and find the rest of them without scrolling through the app. So it's just thinking creatively about stuff like that. But as well, Renee, given you've just started, I would be recommending you do things like getting yourself on other people's shows, because that's a really good way to find new podcast audiences that are already listening to podcasts.
But yeah, that's a great tip. And that's kind of how I started, I think, in the podcasting. Because for me, I was, you mentioned earlier, you should, if you listen to podcasts and you've got something to say, then you should start a podcast. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually not a really auditory person. I don't naturally listen to podcasts. It's kind of not me.
Hilarious.
But I actually love this. I love this video interview. Like, to me, this is another way for me to connect with people and be able to see people face to face and ask some questions that I know my audience are, desperate to know the answers to. So I love that aspect of it. And but I did start by, so then, I think it was about a year ago, 12 months ago, I said, no, I'm not going to start a podcast. It's not me. I'm not auditory. I don't listen to stuff. It's not who I am. But I do see the value in it. So I'm just going to go and be a guest on other people's podcasts. So that's kind of where I started, was being a guest on others. But I guess in all of those guest appearances, I haven't mentioned my own podcast because it didn't exist yet.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, if they're the things you like, then do more of that. So if video is really where your heart is, then do Facebook Lives to promote the show, or do teasers about the show. Or there's a few people that are live streaming their podcasts and videos now. So they'll live stream on Facebook using Facebook Live, but using a third-party app in order to bring an interview guest onto the live stream. Then that becomes the video that gets uploaded to Facebook, and Facebook loves it because it's Facebook Live. It gets uploaded to their YouTube channel and it becomes a podcast. Like, you could look at Vicky Lashenko, the mumpreneur or something like that. She's, for mums in business, basically. She's really kind of leading the pack with that at the moment. And It's just amazing. So if you love the live video, it's so where it's at right now, then I'd be embracing it.
I'm not sure about live. I do like the fact that I've got someone who can edit out all my mistakes, and I'm sure that Stevie is compiling the funniest blooper reel ever, because I do so many fluff ups and I'm just like, it'll come out in the editing, no worries.
Extra funny face. Stevie. She does great work. I'm the same. I quite like that I have editing power, even though I rarely edit anything out. But there you go. It's the way I roll as well.
Yeah, I do kind of feel like, even though, as I become more and more comfortable with this platform, that really, I think that it helps me to relax, and so the editing is less needed because I'm more relaxed knowing we can edit. So it's kind of
And that's, I think that's a really good point. And, when they Facebook announced a while ago that they're going to release live streaming, like audio streaming. So it's like, we like Facebook Live, but for audio. So there were a lot of people saying to me, oh my God, is this the death of podcasting? And I'm like, no way is it the death of podcasting, because there will always be people like you and I that operate better in the environment of pre-recording. And, you look at shows like Serial, This American Life, they can't produce those live. They are months in the works and production and editing. So, I just think it adds to the excitement around audio. It doesn't replace audio.
Yes. And I think that also, one of the great things about podcasting that you talked about earlier on was the fact that, you can go walk the dog or, do whatever you're doing, be driving in the car and listen to podcasts, and you've got them all lined up and it's on demand when you're ready to listen. Whereas to have a live on demand kind of audio on Facebook, to me, doesn't fill that gap. It's not what you're going to be doing while you're walking the dog or driving in the car, I wouldn't think. So I think, I agree. Yeah, we're on the same page. So, so let's talk about leverage, because this is the theme of the show, is leverage and loving it. So how have you created leverage in your business, Katie?
Okay, well, lots of different ways, actually. So I have, probably the main way I've done it is I have a course. So it's a self-study course, and it's all about podcasting. So people can come in and over 8 modules learn everything they need to know to get their podcast out there and grow it. And that used to be a course that I ran live. So it was a little bit leveraged because it was a group program. Now it's completely self-study, but what I have added to it is a membership community. So whilst I do a lot of work for my membership community, which is for existing podcasters or those about to launch, is I create, new content for them. I do a live call. I hot seat one of our members' podcasts each month. And so whilst that is quite a bit of work, every additional member doesn't cost me any more work. So that's kind of my leverage baby at the moment. It's the people that I most want to work with, being the people that are already podcasting. It's my zone of interest, curiosity and genius at the moment, because I'm obsessed with how do we improve our businesses and our podcasts. And it's leveraged. I'm aiming to get 100 people in there this year, which will be a really nice, I say passive income and I laugh, leveraged income.
Oh, she'll start me on a rant. Don't you dare call it passive.
I know, God.
I'm biting my tongue. I'm holding back. Renee, do not rant. This is Katie's turn.
Oh, do it. Unleash the power.
Okay, there's no such thing as passive income in a business. No. If you want passive income, talk to a financial advisor. End of story.
Yes. Boom. I love it. You're the same as me. I get really mad at that word as well. But yeah, they're the two main ways. I have also done things like group programs, like masterminds. I do have a mini digital product, like a less than $50 one that is literally sitting there waiting for me to finalize the sales page and launch it. Everything I'm doing at the moment, apart from my VIP coaching, I am trying to leverage.
Yay!
Yay!
So what do you love most about your business at the moment, Katie?
Oh, what do I love most? This is kind of a philosophical question, but I've just finished a 6-month mastermind, and this morning we all sat there and went back through all of the goals that we'd set and, ticked off over the 6 months. So I've been in a very reflective mood, and I think what I love is how much I learn about myself by having a business. Like, it is the biggest personal development journey ever. And I've just had, another one of those kind of aha moments about the way I operate versus the way I think I operate and all of those things. So I'm loving that. And then on a practical level, I am really loving that I've focused in, I've let go of a few things literally just in the last 24 hours in order to focus on my podcasters, because I just love it. I love talking about it. I love serving them. I love hanging out with them. So I'm really excited about what's to come.
That's brilliant. So if you were to go back and start again your podcast today, what advice would you give yourself to the Katie starting out brand new?
Oh, I'm really happy with how I did it and when I did it. I'm really happy I started when I did. So I would say, because, I started really early in comparison to other people. So I'd probably high five myself for that. And I'd probably also say, don't be scared of going weekly. Just do it. Don't wait 2 years.
I love that. I love that. Now we're going to put in the show notes where everyone can find you, because I'm sure they're going to want more from Katie Wyatt. We've been talking to Katie Wyatt today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.